This is Optimal Finance Daily, episode 1975, The Lame 25% Rule and How Much House You Can Responsibly Afford, by Philip Taylor of ptmoney.com. And I'm your host and personal finance enthusiast, Diana Merriam. Now let's hear today's post as we optimize your life. The Lame 25% Rule and How Much House You Can Responsibly Afford, by Philip Taylor of ptmoney.com. Right now, as of February 2022, mortgage rates are attractive. As a result, the temptation to buy is great, especially for first-time homebuyers who want to get in now while they can save big. However, just because you think now is an excellent time to buy does not mean you should. Make sure you know how much house you can afford on your income before you jump in. How much house can I afford? When determining how much house you can afford, the banks will do a calculation based on how trustworthy you are with a mortgage. While that number is usually higher than what Dave Ramsey would recommend, factors that influence your eventual mortgage payment include: Number 1, credit score. The better your credit, the more favorable of terms you can expect from your lenders. This is why it's important to clean up your credit before you start shopping for a mortgage. The best way to improve your credit is to get your credit reports from the 3 big credit bureaus: Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. You can get all 3 reports for free each year at annualcreditreport.com. If there are any errors on a report, you need to dispute it with that credit bureau. Also, if there are any delinquent debts, you must get those resolved and have your reports updated. All actions to clean up your credit will result in a higher score and improve your chances of approval and the interest rates you have to pay. Number 2, debt to income ratio. Your debt to income ratio is a metric that banks use to determine your ability to take on more debt. The number is calculated by comparing your total monthly debt payments to your pre-tax income. While Dave Ramsey preaches the 25% number, banks do not like your mortgages, taxes, and insurance to exceed 28% of your income, and your total monthly debt payments to exceed 36% of your income. If you have a higher credit score, you can be approved for a larger mortgage. But in general, you can take your monthly income, multiply it by 0.28, and that will be the mortgage payment the bank will approve with insurance and taxes. Other costs to consider. There are several things you can do to reduce the cost of your first home, but you still might not be able to handle the cost of homeownership. Let's look at some ways to help determine the answer to the question, how much house can I afford? In some cases, your mortgage plus interest may be more than your current rent payment. But that's not all. As we've mentioned before, homeownership comes with other costs, including: Number 1, property taxes. You'll need to make property tax payments. Whether a yearly lump sum is due or whether you pay monthly with your mortgage payment, this is something to prepare for. Number 2, maintenance and repairs. No longer can you have the landlord bear the cost of maintenance and repairs on your dwelling. You're responsible for the costs associated with keeping up the home and taking care of it. This can cost more than you might expect. Number 3, utilities. Many people forget to consider the extra costs associated with a home. In many cases, your home is larger than your rental. This means that it will cost more to heat it. Electricity and water costs are likely to go up as well. And if your landlord previously paid sewer and garbage collection costs, these are additional expenses. And number 4, falling home values. When renting, your landlord bears the cost of a falling home value. If you buy, though, you could find yourself underwater, especially if your down payment was small. Are you prepared to take the risk that your home will decline in value? How much house can I afford with an FHA loan? Mortgages through the Federal Housing Authority have much looser terms than private market mortgages. If you have a credit score of 500 to 579, you'll need a 10% down payment. Those with credit scores of 580 or higher can get approved with as little as 3.5% down. Be aware the FHA loans tend to have more hoops to jump through to get the home approved for the mortgage. The lower down payment doesn't change the equation on how much you can afford in your monthly payments, but it can get you into a house much sooner if you don't have the upfront cash. How much can I afford with a VA loan? VA loans are available to active duty or retired service members and their spouses. The loans have as little as $0 down payment, and the rates on those loans are competitive with traditional mortgages. Those who qualify can enjoy 0 PMI, even with a $0 down payment. Being able to qualify with no down payment is great, but make sure the final mortgage payment plus taxes and insurance still fits your budget. The 25% of salary rule of thumb. Here's a question I received recently from a friend and reader about how much house he could afford on his income. He referenced Dave Ramsey's rule of thumb about not having a mortgage payment for more than 25% of your salary. I have a Dave Ramsey question, PT. I've Googled around and cannot find the answer and was wondering if you knew. Ramsey states that you should spend no more than 25% of your income on your mortgage. Do you think he wants you to calculate property taxes and insurance in your mortgage payment, or do you think he's simply calculating principal and interest? In my answer, I said yes, Dave definitely wants you to include it. The second comment on his post suggests that he said so specifically in one of his newspaper columns. Further, taxes and insurance are guaranteed, so you should consider them. I went on to say that a rule of thumb, most are kind of lame, is limited in its simplicity. For instance, I can go out and get an adjustable or variable rate mortgage payment that's less than 25% of my take-home pay today. And tomorrow, the housing market could crash another 30%, rates could go through the roof, and I could lose my job. Owning the home outright as quickly as possible sounds like a better rule for the future. Test to find out what you can afford. Before you buy, it's a good idea to go for a test run with the increased cost of home ownership. One thing you can do is take 30% of your expected mortgage and interest payment and add it back on. So if your expected mortgage and interest payment is $1,100, add $330 so that your total estimated monthly costs are $1,430. Then consider the difference between what you pay now for your rental and the estimated cost. If you pay $850 in rent now, it means that you will pay an extra $580. Can you afford that much house? Let's find out with a real savings test. Next, open a high-yield bank account. Put that extra $580 in the account every single month. Do this for at least 4 months. Are you having difficulty making the new payment? If so, you might not be ready to purchase a home. The higher costs may exceed your ability to pay for them. Before you buy a home, you need to make sure that you're truly ready to shoulder the costs. Otherwise, you'll be house poor, and it will strain your monthly cash flow. You could end up in a worse position than if you continued to rent. You just listened to the post titled The Lame 25% Rule and How Much House You Can Responsibly Afford by Philip Taylor of PTmoney.com. Home ownership. For many of us, owning a home is a big part of the American dream, but it can also be a nightmare for the financially unprepared. I was recently at an event where we looked at 2 case studies of participants to help them with their financial goals and strategies. Before too long, it became really clear that both of them bought expensive homes that have now backed them into a corner. Both of them had mortgages that were more than half of their take-home pay, and their cash reserves were minimal, so they didn't have much wiggle room for the kinds of expenses mentioned in this article. I think it's worth really questioning if buying a house is right for you based on where you are in your financial journey. In my case, I bought my house as a lifestyle decision after I was debt-free and investing heavily in retirement vehicles. And while I don't look at my primary residence as an investment, I was house hacking for about 2 years with a roommate who covered 90% of my mortgage, and I do plan to rent this house out in the future. Home ownership has high carrying costs, and if you need to access the money you have locked up in equity in your home, you either need to sell the house or take on a home equity loan, which creates more risk. I recognize the risks of home ownership, and so really only considered it after getting other financial goals out of the way, like getting out of consumer debt, fully funding retirement vehicles, and building up a year of expenses in cash. That should do it for another edition of Optimal Finance Daily. I'll be back tomorrow as usual, so I'll see you there on the Friday show where your optimal life awaits.